Hello chess friends, this is National Master Paul Agron, and today I would like to continue our series about elementary endings, or elementary checkmates if you like to call them that way. So in part 1 we've looked at a parallel mate with two rooks. We found out that the king is not really needed to checkmate if you are up to rooks in an elementary endgame. And then we continued exploring another elementary checkmate, namely the one with the queen. And there we discovered that the king is needed to help execute this checkmate. Even though the queen is extremely powerful and covers a tremendous percentage of the board, the queen by itself needs the help of a monarch to execute a checkmate. Today, I would like to walk you through another elementary technique, which is quite a bit harder than the previous two, and that is a checkmate with two bishops. In fact, two bishops cover a lot of squares on an open board and can be almost as powerful as a queen, as we'll see. And of course, from any position, two bishops with the help of a king can deliver checkmate. Yet we need to have a good technique, because in chess there's a 50 move rule in the real tournament chess, and it's very easy to dilly-dally and walk around the board and make mistakes, and especially for beginners it's very easy to hit the 50 move limit and basically make a draw in such positions if you are not well versed in such techniques. So let's start. Well, two bishops, when they stand side by side like this, they divide the board into 4 quadrants. It's very important to unite the bishops, because when they stand apart, they don't cooperate as well as when they're together. So here we have the upper and lower quadrant, the left and right. So the king, when you unite the bishops, can end up in any one of those quadrants. And basically, I'm going to describe the technique of checkmating bottom up, but you could very well just reposition the bishops and checkmate left to right to left, top to bottom, whichever way you like. Essentially just understanding that there is a quadrant and the king gets caught in one of those pyramids when the bishops are side by side is very important. So let's start. Well, this is a typical position that one might find himself or herself in when the two bishops are united and the king is close. And the king exerts an aura of influence highlighted in yellow here. That is, all the squares around the king are being controlled. And what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to penetrate into the white's position and to take away squares. And here we'll be introduced to the concept of a waiting move, basically just to making a move with the king or the bishop in order to force our opponent to move, which will enable us to gain territory or reposition the bishop somehow. So here the king would basically march, and this can be considered a waiting move, as we're waiting for the white king to give up ground. So here white king has to make a move. This is one of the 3-4 moves available to the white king. It virtually doesn't matter what move white king would have made. Now we're able to penetrate into white's territory and take away a lot of squares with our king. So, for example, white can respond in this way. That is not the only way white can respond in, but if white were to respond in this way, we can move our bishop, thereby shrinking the cage. Okay, so the pyramid or the cage has just become smaller. And for example, white might want to run to the edge of the board away from the black king, and the black king marches in, taking up more space. So after the white king marches all the way to the edge, it's very important to not stalemate the white king. We'll revisit the stalemating motive a little later, but for now the king would essentially take away the entire, or virtually the entire rank, together with the bishops. And here the white king would have to vacate the side square, and we would take the side square with the bishop. And after the next forced move, we would take another side square. And after a few such moves, which I'm not going to show you the whole process because we'll go through that process multiple times today, but we would end up in this position where the white king takes away all the flight squares, including the yellow squares, and the two bishops side by side end up checkmating the king, with the light square bishop controlling the side escape square and dark bishop essentially delivering the lethal check. So this is a typical setup. But before we basically go through the whole technique, let's break it apart into parts. And what better way than to start with a position where we have driven the king to a point where we are ready to start executing our technique. This is such a position. Now let us say it is black to move. So this is going to be very similar to the previous position, except that the king is positioned at what we'll call an apex, but more about the apex later. So right now we want to take away the yellow square, which is the escape square, and to drive the king rightward into the upper right corner. The king obliges, and we move the other bishop, taking away the other side square. And the king obliges, trying to escape via the red square. And here we'll take an opposition. An opposition might be a word that you're familiar with. It's a chess term. So the king is going to just stand right in front of the enemy king and essentially take away the maximum number of squares available. When the kings oppose each other, the kings take away the maximum number of squares from each other, namely 3 squares. Okay, so now the king marches towards the bishop, trying to escape via another red square, and we deliver a check, driving the king to the right, and we drive the king to the right, and we deliver the lethal checkmate. So this is how it is done. So let's talk about apex squares. So here, red squares are what are known as apex squares. They're at the tip of a 3 by 3 quadrant. So there are 4 such quadrants. And by the way, we can checkmate into any of the 4 corners. So here, it's just important to understand that the king is optimally placed at an apex square. So here it is at the upper right apex square, but had we wanted to checkmate into the upper left corner, the king would really need to stand ideally in the left apex square. So let's go through our previous example with a little bit less color. Okay, so here is a very similar position, yet now it is black to move. And now the question is, how do we drive the king rightward? We want to, everything is right in this position, right? Our king is at the apex square, the bishops are side by side. By the way, it's very important that the bishops are not entirely in the center. They're one off center, meaning, you know, it's as if you centralize the bishops and move them 1 row to the right. And the bishops are 3 squares away from the edge. So that's the optimal position for the bishops. And that has been the position from which we have been checkmating in the previous 2 positions. And so that's basically what I want you to achieve roughly. Okay, king at the apex or near the apex somehow, and bishops side by side, 1 off center, and 3 squares away from the edge, with the king in front of the bishops. Very important, king in front of the bishops. But now it's black to move. Well, here we need to make a waiting move, and we're making a waiting move. By the way, that's not the only waiting move. We could have brought the bishop virtually anywhere on that diagonal. That would be another waiting move. And now white is forced to vacate the side square. So white moves to the right, and now we capture the side square. White moves to the right, and we capture the next side square. White moves to the right, and remember opposition? Yes, we have moved into opposition, taking away the optimal number of squares away from the right king. But here, unlike in the previous position, the right king decides to go into the corner, and we take away the side square, and the white king has to make a move, and we check, and we deliver the checkmate. So this is how it is done. So now I'd like to pause, and I would like to introduce you to pretty much a random position, which I will happen to checkmate again into the upper right corner. But had my opponent in the next game, or miniature if you will, had my opponent chosen a different set of moves, it could have been a different corner. Okay, so let's look at this position. So it starts here. The bishops are just in random positions. White king is centralized, and our king still needs to basically construct a situation where, which I previously described. So how is this done? Let us first join the bishops. Okay, so bishop made a move, the king made a move, and now the bishop made yet another move. And so I'm going to actually just drop back for a second. Okay, so the bishop basically previously made a move, and the king made a move to e6. And so the light bishop just joined our friend, okay, to take away a large number of squares. So now we've constructed our quadrant. The king moves to the right, and our king just starts marching up, okay, until it reaches the point where it could start entering white's position. And after white makes a move, we make a move. By the way, here I basically remove all the highlights. I want you guys to visualize all this stuff. Okay, sometimes too much color can prevent you from thinking for yourself and visualizing all these squares. Okay, so pyramid is constructed. The king comes in, taking away the squares. And after the white makes a move, so the king just continues preventing our bishops and the king from possibly penetrating. And we make another move, taking away, shrinking the cage. And now we stop shrinking the cage. Now it's important to not continue advancing the bishops, because it might actually be harder to checkmate that way. The easiest thing is just using the same principle where we penetrate. It's kind of a waiting move. We are asking white to make a move, and we're heading for the apex square. Remember the apex square? So after the king makes a move, we make a move, and we make another waiting move. And here it's very important not to stalemate white. If you step on a red square, the game will be over and you'll shake hands. Okay, I've watched a lot of kids play in my basically training days, group training days, and I would see that happen quite often. Now here you basically step into your apex square at the tip of the 3x3. And after the king moves, now we will take away the side square, we'll take away another side square, and finally, after taking the opposition, here we know how to drive this into a checkmate. So hopefully you found this helpful. I'm very excited to hear feedback from you, and essentially happy elementary checkmates.